Hi, everybody. Welcome to the presidential party of ERA. We are here to look back at the day that it's been a big spoiled vote. Catherine Connolly elected president, and a few other bits. So there's a bit to talk about. There's a video just up now. I put on X of Catherine Connolly's acceptance speech. So I want to have a look at that. So I'll pull that up now, and we'll have a look at it. Not too much to reflect on. Some stuff to reflect on. Spoil the vote. So I had marked that 15% would be significant a few weeks ago when I was debating it to myself and with other people. 15% would be significant, I said loosely. That wasn't a cutoff point. It ended up being 13%, which is fairly good. So spoil the vote was significant. It wasn't insignificant, and it does have some sort of political rhetorical consequences. I have watched Connolly's acceptance speech already, and she did mention it. You know what I mean? So it's obviously significant if it's a big part of the story. She herself is mentioning it clearly, yeah, there's a lot more to say on that, but let's just my screen keeps blanking out on me. Okay, so let's try. Let me know if the sound works on this.
Thank you very much for being here.
You know what I will say about Catherine Connolly now, before she says anything else? I mean, there are various reasons I sort of supported her. Her votes in the past on certain issues, Lisbon, Nice, COVID, Vax Pass, various other things like that she was decent on, and I know she has her faults, obviously, and she's learned to speak Irish in her later life, which is commendable, etc., etc. But putting all that aside, like her or not, you have to say, and this is very superficial, she does have serious gravitas, much like Maria Steen did, which is why it was a pity that the election was effectively rigged, right, by blocking Steen out of it. I always felt like a debate with Jim Gavin, Heather Humphreys, Maria Steen, and Catherine Connolly would have been a two-person debate. There would have been two adults in the room, and there would have been two people intelligently, respectably, because they're both obviously very respectable and intelligent women. They would have been engaging from differing points of view on all the same big issues, of course, of the day. And Gavin and Humphreys would have been totally irrelevant. I mean, the Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, but do they? This is what I mean. Say what you want about Catherine Connolly, or say what you want about the left and all this, but you know, Gavin and Heather Humphreys or any of the rest of them are just a vacuum, right? There's nothing really. They don't like that. That was Heather Humphreys' problem. She didn't really have anything to say. She doesn't really have a view of anything, right? Whereas Maria Steen obviously does a very sincere view of things and a very, very well thought out point of view, very educated, serious gravitas, as does Connolly. I don't agree with her on a lot of stuff, but she does have gravitas and she clearly is intelligent. You wouldn't catch her just being a dumbass, right? If you spoke to her on migration or this or that, you might not like it. She might be kind of full of shit a bit on it, but the woman can definitely speak. She can definitely speak to ideas. She can speak to history. She's got gravitas and she's got that real presence and energy. And I don't know, just I would love if she were truly my candidate. If my values I felt were represented through her, I would think what a perfect human vessel for it. And Maria Steen is the same. We all know that. Those people are very rare in or out of politics. People who have that commanding presence, that sort of personal sort of self-control or attitude. I don't know. I obviously don't have it the way I'm trying to express myself here, but you know, it's a very calm and serene sort of energy, control of one's demeanor, and it's always sort of reliable. They're always the same way. People liked Michael D. Higgins for that in a way, but I don't know. It might sound like it doesn't really matter, but to me, it's I don't know, it's kind of good. I mean, if I can have a Catherine Connolly for all the constituency she represents, and if it was to be some like oafish dipshit, or it to be her, I'd obviously rather it be her. In just the way she carries herself, it's more dignified for the country. It's less grating to have to listen to, over the course of her presidency. So there's that.
Thank you very much for being here, Taoiseach, Tánaiste, Heather.
I've had audio issues before, so sorry. If you really can't hear it, I'll turn it up. I'm not asking you for like a full-on audio sound check, just like, can you hear it type of level of can you hear it at a basic level.
My family, it's not easy for them to stand here. My family in particular, who are very private. And I want to thank all of you for being here, and all the leaders of the parties that came in behind me, and the TDs and senators, the independent TDs and senators who stood behind me. From day one, I emphasised that I was an independent candidate with an independent mind. And for all who voted for me, thank you very much. It will be an absolute privilege to serve you. For those who didn't vote for me and those who spoiled their votes, let me tell you, I will be an inclusive president to listen to all of you. I will be making no distinction on the basis of votes. I will be a president who listens and who reflects and who speaks when it's necessary, and a voice for peace, a voice that builds on our policy of neutrality, a voice that articulates the existential threat posed by climate change, and a voice that recognises the tremendous work being done, the length and breadth of the country, and we need to recognise that and ensure it is properly resourced. But that's your job. That's a political job on the ground. I will raise my voice, and our whole mantra during this campaign was, we can shape a new republic together, and we can use our voices for those who have or haven't the ability, nor the circumstances don't allow. But my message is, use your voice in every way you can, because a republic and a democracy needs constructive questioning. And together we can shape a new republic that values everybody, that values and champions diversity, and that takes confidence in our own identity, our Irish language, our English language, and the new people who have come to our country. I will be an inclusive president for all of you, and I regard it as an absolute honour, the vote I have been given, and I will represent you nationally and internationally to the best of my ability and as professionally and as humanely as possible. Garamina Mata.
So yeah, that's that, I suppose. You know, I find myself with almost an anticlimactic feeling about some of it, because in a way, everything is the same. What has changed since a few days ago, or, the presidential role is ceremonial anyway. But I mean, even in outcomes, I see here Last True Gale says 13% is impressive. I agree. But not a lot has changed. I mean, and what I mean is even like analytically, because it's a ceremonial role, it doesn't matter, but just what we can take out of this analytically, okay, yes, there's a certain left-wing sort of locked-in faction that are sort of ascendant versus Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael status quo, but as are the populist sort of disgruntled outsiders, right-wing nationalists and all that. They are also sort of ascendant in their own way, but locked out. And the democracy is sort of fragile, by which I mean like the republic, the democracy that she mentioned, they are quite fragile in the sense that I spoke about this last night if you were here. They're sort of just in a bit of a bunker mentality now. just locking candidates out, fake everything, fake communities, fake elections, fake media, fake politicians, fake slogans. And the boomers are dying, basically. Like the Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael thing was pretty much dependent on boomers and the fumes of a former Ireland, to vote for a sort of an empty status quo party, is a luxury of a former time in a way. I'm not to say that politics didn't matter in the past. Of course they mattered. We had the north of Ireland question, we had this, that, and the other. Like, politics didn't begin in 2016, but Ireland as a cohesive, normal nation, bar the 6 counties, was a sort of a foregone conclusion. So politics could be a little more whimsical in a way. Do you vote Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael? It's part of your family history, kind of, who cares? Things will be the same anyway, like, etc. We're in a much different time now where those parties have coalesced. They basically claim to have no values besides just they're vassal parties, right? They're vassals of higher powers, of the Western order and all that. And they're taking it to the extreme, even compared to a lot of other Western countries, maybe on par with Australia and Canada. We're one of the worst ones, and that's all they are. But if you ask them what, they just don't have a view. And so these are all, like, I know I'm rambling already, but these are just the processes that are already underway that anyone with kind of half a brain or who's paying attention to these things can observe and notice, and could have observed and noticed weeks ago. And here we are with this, election. And I'd love to come to you, like a lot of other analysts or whatever you call them, talking heads, Twitter posters, and say this means something massive one way or the other. It does, but those things were also true last week, and they'll be true next week. This isn't really a massive change to that. I mean, the spoil the vote thing is, in its sense, significant. It is higher than expected, higher than I expected, probably higher than pretty much anyone expected. So I suppose that does stand out. To be fair, and what also stands out somewhat is the collapse of, I think, the collapse of the Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, RTE media. That sort of control is kind of dead a little bit. And what it means, again, this was true last week and obvious last week as well, is that the future of, I mean, this is so obvious, right? The future of Irish politics, and by which I mean I'm excluding the 5 billion Indians that are arriving here every day, right? And all that. That's a whole lot. That's population replacement and everything else, right? But in terms of Irish politics, like Irish politics among Irish people for the most part, the future is effectively Catherine Connolly versus Maria Steen, or it's a far left Antifa versus a far right live streamer who runs around Dublin shouting at people or whatever. It's that whole world, that whole conversation, that whole gravitational center of politics between that, whatever you call that. And I'll get into a bit what the left kind of is, or the nominal left is, versus like what I'm doing. I'm live streaming. I'm a nationalist. You're kind of, a lot of you are that way. That really is the question of Irish politics. The Heather Humphreys of this world, and Fine Gael and all of that, and Fianna Fáil, they represent a moneyed interest, a diminishing moneyed interest, because there are two constituencies who are, in effect, the rich. Let's call it 3 constituencies in a way: the rich, possibly the rural, but mainly the old, the rich and the old. Those are 2, it's fair to say, dying constituencies. in the times we live in right now. More and more people who used to be cozy middle class are not so much anymore. Lots of people who were even slightly upper middle class back in the day, they won't be anymore. Certainly, there won't be any new ones being minted. You see people who, up until maybe 5 to 10 years ago, would have considered themselves well enough to do, decent enough combined salary, definitely able to live fancy, holidays and this and that, and go stay in a bubble in Fermanagh in the forest and post it online, and just a lot of trips and a lot of this and a lot of that and loads of money. Like, they're not mad rich, but they're quite well off middle class. There won't be that many new ones of them being minted anymore, because when they want to buy a house in Dublin, they're going to have to pay 600-700 grand for like a fairly bog basic house, and that kind of thing. So the rich are diminishing. It'll just be asset owners, and a small slice of people who have enough income, very small slice, to contend with the new reality. And then the older obviously dying off as well, literally dying off, and if they're not dying off, becoming actually functionally senile. So the new conversation is among us. It's among people under 50. Nobody seems to be happy with the economic situation, very small percentage. And people are sort of urbanized, and if not physically, then culturally. And mass migration is rampant. And so these are the questions. And that's just proven true here as well, in a sense, it's the same thing. You see that with Catherine Connolly's statement. She mentioned the spoil the vote people. She says she represents them or whatever. Not really, right? Obviously, but she's mentioning it. That's significant. And also she mentions the new people, she calls them, in Ireland as well, which in a different environment, that wouldn't really come up. She wouldn't even need to mention it. She'd just say, I'm here to be a good president or whatever, but she has to mention that. I mean, it was a very short statement, and that was included in it. So these questions hang over the conversation. They dominate the conversation. And this is in a scenario where call it the nationalist side of things, the like populist nationalist thing, is like very firmly held outside the gates. Our candidate, like Catherine Connolly, is a milquetoast candidate for a lot of leftists. Like, a lot of proper leftists would consider her, compromising. Like she's not and radical enough for them and all that, but she does the job. She's a decent enough figurehead. I think Maria Steen would have been that for right-wing populists as well. She wouldn't have gone hardcore on all these issues, but people would have thought that, well, she's our gal, so to speak, and she'll do as a champion. And she's, of course, a great champion. She has all the personal attributes. And we had that, and they basically didn't allow it. They didn't allow her. She was too late in the game, apparently. Nick Delahanty was earlier in the game, but he wasn't allowed. Even Gareth Sheridan, who was in no way, had no politics to speak of, really. Even he wasn't allowed. So it's a closed shop. But even with that closed shop, and even with spoil the vote, yeah, it had Ganley, the usual suspects. All these people, a few appearing on TV once or twice. But for the most part, we don't have NGOs, we don't have a political thing, we don't have student unions and all that. So even by being barred from the discourse in official circles, for the most part, we're pulling 13%. And also, Jim Gavin votes, a lot of people, who knows the split there, but a certain amount of them would have been effectively protest votes, people voting Jim Gavin ironically or something. So it's probably all in about 20% of people, somewhere there. Maybe even a few confused Humphreys voters who just don't know any better. I don't know. Someone in the chat asks, why does Ganley get so much airtime? Why indeed? It's a very good question. But interesting. But you know, the real split, the real split is Connolly versus Steen. It's that kind of conversation, and what would happen if that sort of just broke out, like if we were allowed to have that. The essential thing as well is that by not having Steen in the race, of course, this doesn't mean that Steen would have gotten 13% of the vote. She would have, of course, gotten a lot more than that, because she would have. There are a lot of people who vote Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, for example, who sort of, they don't vote because they're diehard neoliberals or something. That's just how it is. That's all they see in front of them, and they don't want to vote for the Student Union Brigade or whatever. Well, if they had someone, a Maria Steen or whoever, they might vote. Some of them might vote that way. Some of the Sinn Féin crowd who sort of lean over to Connolly, because, of course, bear in mind, we were left with a dichotomy. I myself supported Connolly, right? Because we were in reality left with a dichotomy of two candidates, Humphreys or Connolly. And that was an artifice. That was a creation of the regime, of course. It didn't have to be like that. And so a lot of, this is the thing I haven't seen anyone mention, is that were there to be a Steen, were there to be a, you name it, right? Just fill in an avatar, a respectable, a person who's got the look and the talk and all the razzmatazz, who broadly speaking represents like populist, nationalist, sort of socially conservative, or at least reasonable centrist. We know that more there would have been more votes. There would have been some shaved off Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, probably, right? People who just kind of lost, as in they vote because they don't want to vote for Connolly, and they end up sort of just drifting just about over to Humphreys because it's such a forced dichotomy. But they would have gone for, let's just put Steen in. But a big chunk of Connolly's own vote, I would say, would have gone to Steen, right? If you ask me who I support out of the two candidates, it's Connolly. But if Steen was there, I would have voted for her. So I'm one. How many others are there? How many others who are like middle of the road, Sinn Féin, sort of left, and they're not even like hardcore. They're not bull rings and blue hair and all that, or septum piercings and all that kind of lark. But they are diehard against Humphreys and Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, against the regime in its purest form. So in lieu of that, or because of that, they lean Connolly. That's a ton of people, right? So in a sense, just a big fake election that doesn't tell us much in terms of who actually got elected and like where the wind really blows. The election was effectively rigged. I would say, let's say Steen had been that champion to kind of unify people who were forced to vote Connolly this time, or spoil their vote, or voted Jim Gavin ironically, or even a boomer who just went for Humphreys because she's, as fits their cultural style or something. But like, had Maria, sorry, I'm kind of all over the place. If Maria Steen had been on, she would obviously have been in the debates, and it would have spurred a whole other level of voters, obviously. She would have been able to make a show of Catherine Connolly, because if Catherine Connolly talks about women's rights and all this, Maria Steen obviously is a big supporter of women, just from a different point of view. And I think she's able to articulate that in a way that can actually appeal to a sort of a left-wing audience and kind of surprise them. So that would have been major. On the immigration question, Catherine Connolly would have been forced to just do the string puppet type of thing, of just over and over again saying we welcome everybody and we need to be nice, whereas Maria Steen could have done a low-key but intelligent critical view of immigration and how we need to limit it, and criticize the excesses of the asylum industry, and she could go to town on that at just the right pitch perfect way, and Connolly would have just been cooked right on TV multiple times. So that would have changed things. But like, just on top of that bare 13% base. You know, it would have gone way up. The situation would have changed a lot. But it's quite possible Connolly still would have won, let's say, right? But it would have been a much tighter race. Like, I do believe it's actually possible Steen could have won, right? It's hard to know, but I think it wasn't that beyond possibility. But if she didn't win, she would have come damn close, and Humphreys and Gavin both would have just become sort of irrelevant, like just sitting in the cook chair, sort of through any debate. Like, what have you got to say? Connolly, like her a lumper, she's got some sort of point of view, some sort of cultural background, a sort of a real ideological point of view. They just don't. And Steen has the opposite, and the other two would have been just totally irrelevant. So effectively a 2-horse race, and that's kind of just my point. I don't even want to stay here too long tonight. Is that if you shave off all the bullshit, you have a 2-horse race. If you allow the right candidates to run, if you give them airtime, if you let them participate in the debate, just let them run, really, then we have a 2-horse race in Ireland, really. If you strip away all the candidates and the politics and the rules and regs of elections and all that bullshit, there are 2 real factions in Ireland, possibly 3 that are competing, but 2 really, which is the kind of cultural, call it left, let's just say, the like liberal left, and the populist, post-liberal right, let's say, nationalists. And that's the conversation. And then maybe as a third party, a sort of a withering money pensioner class sort of type of thing, or like, you know, boomers effectively, off to the corner. But everyone knows in the like in the room, that the conversation is between 2 people, that, like, the adults are talking, so to speak. So that's just how it is going forward, and I sort of welcome that. I just want that to happen. Like, I wanted a few years ago when Sinn Féin were ascended, I did want them to just take the government. There was a feeling for a while that would just happen, and I wish it just kind of had, because let's just get that out of the way. Good old Tay. Yeah, let's just get it out of the way. Can we just have the, you know, this is going to be 20 years stumbling along, basically, or maybe not that long, but, you know, can we just cut to the chase? Can we, like, not rig shit anymore and just cut to the chase? Now, some of the points I wanted to make, you know, I like to ramble sometimes, or I don't like to, but I just do. So I'll just remind myself. Yeah. The question going forward is, like, it's now on the NGO, and this is actually the great thing in a way, is that as Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael die, the emphasis shifts to the Catherine Connollys of this world, the Sinn Féins of this world, and all the rest of it. And they are, I believe, bankrupt. Like, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael are obviously bankrupt, like, in terms of their legitimacy, totally bankrupt. And the Connollys and the Sinn Féins get to kind of have this outsider status, but I just want them just be in. Just like, let's just examine you now, because they are so institutional and so status quo that it kind of just makes me sick a little bit. And I like Humphreys mainly on neutrality. I agree with her on Palestine. That's another thing. But let's just say, as a domestic issue, neutrality. That is a huge one for me. And they genuinely are, like, NATO and the EU and the kind of Western order, American-led, are pushing to militarize Europe. They're pushing to de-neutralize Ireland and sort of get us tangentially involved in all these military alliances against Russia and other, China and all this kind of stuff. I just don't want that. I don't want to be involved in that at all. We're already a vassal in every sort of way. We do have this tradition of neutrality and opposing effectively US imperialism now. And that's kind of good. But I'm just reading your chats there. But other than that, other than one or two issues which they're good on, they're totally bankrupt. Like I saw an article from Matt Tracy a few weeks ago. He writes in Gript. And I might be butchering it here, but he basically went through like the US Chamber of Commerce's, I hope I'm getting this right. It was like their report on the housing situation in Ireland, because they have multinationals here and they have their staff working in the multinationals, and how the housing crisis is so bad that it's actually choking out the system itself, basically, right? And you had Patrick Collison or Collison, however you say that. No, not Patrick, the other one, the brother, the darker haired guy. What's his name? Who cares? Let's say John. He had an article today with the Irish Times, more or less saying the same thing. We need to build, baby, build, and all this kind of stuff, because our population is growing dramatically, but we're not doing the other half of the equation. And the US Chamber of Commerce was sort of saying the same. Anyway, Matt Tracy was going through this Chamber of Commerce sort of little statement about housing in Ireland and how our population is rising so much and we're not building enough because of planning and because of this and because of that and because of water in Dublin, or the usual. But it didn't at all critique the idea of just continuing to pour in hundreds of thousands of people, not even like all skilled workers. It's like most of them aren't, like how many of them actually go into Intel and work there? Very, very few, right? So at no point did they criticize the core of the issue, which is the amount of people we're sort of bringing in and all that. And even the language they used, the style of language, the actual down to the choices of exact wording. He pointed out how it is almost totally indistinguishable from what you would get from Catherine Connolly or Mary Lou McDonald or some NGO person or whatever on housing. This sort of completely neutered sort of I don't know, one-legged, take on what's actually happening. This whole idea that, well, bringing in hundreds of thousands of people basically annually is sort of some religious artifact that we cannot even begin to talk about. We don't have to justify it. It's all just, we're just heaping unexamined assumptions. Well, our economy is based on this and that and the other, but there's no debate, there's no conversation, there's no questioning that at all. And basically he was pointing out how the like anti-imperialist, right on, left, cool people, Sinn Féin and all that, are basically indistinguishable from the regime on pretty much all of their takes. And it's the classic thing of when they accuse the likes of me, like online or something, you're a fascist, you're with the landlords, some weird take like that. It's just like, it's a cliche at this point, but I always just say to them, they septum piercing, like college student, Trinity, whatever it is, right? It's just like, okay, let's just go to Google, let's go to Intel, let's go to name the biggest banks in Ireland, and let's go to Realtas Nahéireann or whatever. Let's go to every like institutional major thing we can find and ask, and let's go down through my views on things, my views on should we do LGBT in schools, you know what I mean? Most parents aren't really asking for that. Should we have just mass immigration? Should we deport all these spoofers? Blah, blah. Do all those multinationals and these big powers, and even some like scaldy Gombean landlord with a big ring of keys going around asking his tenants to pay up or whatever, you name it, they're literally the capitalist in his top hat, right, with the monocle. Like, do they agree with me or do they agree with you? And of course it's one for one, pretty much entirely, bar neutrality and in some cases Palestine. They pretty much agree. The take is no different. I mean, we just need to build more houses and have more love in our hearts, and the government are greedy and the government are incompetent. They just need to build some more houses. Something generally like that. Oh, healthcare is falling apart. nobody can access healthcare. We just need to spend more money or be nicer or be less incompetent or something. It's just a platitude kind of thing. It's like, yeah, but like obviously, like everything, it comes down to supply and demand and economic structure, and like there's debates to be had on all these things. But they don't have anything more to say. As in, if you go to say Google and you say, what's the healthcare situation? Like they'll say the healthcare is really bad. We need to be more loving and nicer and, have better services. Yeah, obviously we all agree, like more or less agree with that. We need to have better services, but it's just completely vapid, complete platitude. The only thing, as far as I can see, the nominal left in Ireland are okay on the surface is like basically neutrality. And that's kind of it. And the ironic thing about that is that if you go to most nominally right-wing people, nationalist populists and all that, all the people chanting get them out and get trans out of schools and all this kind of stuff, if you ask them their view on neutrality and Ukraine and should we go to war and should we join the EU military and should we like have affiliations with NATO and all that, they will say fuck no, right? They don't want to either. So it's like, in reality, the nominal left don't really have a monopoly on that. Like, I mean, and that's the thing as well. They pretend they do by sort of, let's say, hogging it a little bit. But in reality, they don't at all. That's sort of a universal belief in Ireland. So what do they, where do they differ from Fine Gael? That's what I'm sort of a little bit lost on with the likes of, let's just take Sinn Féin. Let's keep Catherine Connolly out of it for now. I do struggle to, like with all these, like, I don't know, TikTok influencers who are like, the Palestine and this and that and the other, and they're like, oh, fuck Fine Gael, all these boomers, all these landlords. And yeah, okay, there's something to all that stuff, that sort of rejection of things. But like in essence though, what's the difference? Like what's the difference like between that? And that brings me a little bit to the question of the right. Like, the right, I think the NGO student union left or whatever, they have their probably a bit of a high watermark now. I don't know, I just think that doesn't have legs, right? It'll play out to some extent. This is one such case, sort of. But and even then, like as someone pointed out, I have a screenshot here because I'm not good at remembering little factoids. Too much of a lazy. That turnout was 45%, meaning 55% of those eligible did not vote. Of the people who did vote, 13% deliberately spoiled their ballots, and 7% voted for a candidate who had withdrawn or weeks earlier. That means 20% of the votes cast were spoiled or invalid. Anyway, altogether, this means 64% of eligible voters chose not to vote, spoil their ballot, or voted for a withdrawn candidate, meaning only 36% of the electorate in total actually voted for Connolly or Heather Humphreys. So, you can't say that her election is totally invalid. Like, I mean, obviously a certain decent chunk of people voted for her, but, it is a bit empty as well. And that'll just play out. And so the question is, there isn't going to be a mass uprising of landlords and pro-NATO people directly against this sort of left. The only people with ascendant credibility are the nationalist populist right. Okay, so what I want is to not follow on the journey, to like the journey of delegitimization naturally. So Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael had their run. They're bankrupt and redundant now, basically. The left in the NGO thing will follow. I wish they didn't. If the left had integrity, like on neutrality, and if they were open to conversations, if Catherine Connolly was actually real there and not just using rhetoric, if they were like, no, we will talk. Like, I mean, we have a country, we're here now. Let's have a conversation. Let's have some Indian person who arrived and is on help to buy scheme, and let's talk with a like a like a roadman from Ongar in Dublin, and let's have the girl with the septum piercing, but let's also have Patrick Quinlan, and let's have this and that and the other, and that has to be a decent share on the stage or at the table. Let's all just have a conversation. We all just want a better world, don't we? Like, let's just. Some of you will like recoil at me having the Indian at the table, but you know what I mean. As in, like, we might disagree on how we got here, what's the fucking going on, and all that. But I personally would talk to anyone, right? I'd talk to the Africans from Ongar. I'd talk to some Indians doing their whatever they're doing. I talk to the septum piercing girl. I've no issue at all, and to me, that's always a sign of a roadman from Ongar that does Celtic drill. I think that's a sign of legitimacy. You know, it's almost like think of the memes we picked up from our upbringing watching films on Aaron Brockovich or something like that, right? A basic heuristic for corruption versus justice, or whatever. Corruption versus not corruption, let's call it. The classic thing is the plucky journalist who is exposing Teflon for poisoning the rivers or some shit like that. Like, it's a black and white case of a righteous investigation, a righteous cause, a righteous questioning. Obviously, nobody wants literal poison going into the river. Politicians are being paid, judges are being paid. There's this whole corrupt enterprise going on. And the journalist shows up at the gates and says, "Hey, I'd like to talk to your person. I'd like to ask a few questions." And then they also show up at the back of the facility outside the fence, and they're collecting water samples to deliver to a scientist. And they have a big team of security coming out, and next day their windows getting smashed, and all that kind of stuff. This whole thing of that recoiling of the corrupt entity is always a sign. The lack of openness, the lack of, absolutely, let's talk. We've got nothing to hide, so let's just talk about, like, if we want to ask what's going on in here, we can tell you pretty much, anything. It's the idea of, the other thing is the person who's taking photographs of something public and the authorities doing this, right? Get out of here, get out of here. That's always your sign of the guilty party, obviously. And the same goes rhetorically and politically, obviously, that the person who has nothing to hide and is not afraid of their ideas being challenged, like the person who is confident in their ideas and who says, "Hey, I obviously, like, if I'm legitimate in my views, if I'm legitimate in how I got to them, then I'm happy to talk to anybody. And if in the conversation I'm shown to be wrong, where it's indisputable, well, it's easy. You just go, oh, I might be wrong on that, actually. Do you know what? I'd concede. I'd give that to you and go back and forth. And you'd be able to defend your views. But there's this big firewall up. The Catherine Connolly world won't talk to us, right? And they'll try and say it's about decorum. Well, you're just nasty, and that's just not good. And someone shouted something, like the guy who harassed Mary Lou and them in Dublin. Like, I'm not really for that. Like, same way I'm not for a National Party getting attacked with hatchets and clawhammers at their Ardèche in Fermanagh, which nobody seemed to talk about at the time. But I'm not for any of that stuff. But that's different. There's excess on everywhere. I'm not excess. I didn't harass anyone. Most of us don't harass anyone. We're peacefully, respectably trying to get our ideas across. So can we talk, right? Can we talk? There's an ascendant left, an ascendant right. Why don't we just talk? Why don't we have conversations? But they won't do it because they are, much like Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael and all the rest of it, completely fragile. They know they would not survive contact on that. And it's just a fact. And it's easy for me to say that. I'm so right. Well, why don't they? Is the question. Why don't they then? If the far right and all this is so bad, then just have a conversation and everyone will see how bad I am. Let's say me versus I'll just obviously use myself as an example. Whoever it is, literally Catherine Connolly, right? I'm not in her station, right? She just got elected president. But whoever, some avatar of Catherine Connolly who's in her 30s and she's like, small time talking head person online. My equivalent. I'll talk to them, live stream, in-person debate, discussion. We won't fall out over pedantic things. Let's just have a discussion. They're deathly afraid of that happening. Because they don't survive the engagement. I could go into a debate like that with the flu, having just slept 2 hours the night before and having not prepared at all, like even thought out scenarios or traps or any of that stuff. Just kind of stumble into the room in totally bad form, my worst possible ed, and I would be totally confident of my ideas surviving contact because I know the background is solid. Even if I didn't have all the stats and fact handy to my mind, I'd be like, no, because the basic premise is just so solid. I mean, I know what I'm talking about, and I know the truth is the truth really on this stuff. So I think I can just walk through this fine, And they don't have that. They definitely don't have that. How are they meant to answer? Connolly talked about the new people coming to the country, right? It's lovely rhetoric. Like if 500 people had come to Ireland every year for the last 30 years or whatever, and there was a conversation about, they're not integrating and they're setting up a little mosque somewhere or whatever, and she said, look, we need to have respect for other people and we need to get on with each other and we need to, all the rest of it. If she was given all that kind of rhetoric, I'd probably just shrug and go, yeah, sure. I mean, we don't need to be falling out. You know what I mean? It's a modern world. We have planes and transport. We're not obviously all going to be locked off ethno states forever, right? We're going to have some crossover and all that. That's the world. So yeah, we should probably respect each other and maybe there should even be protections that, to stop sectarianism and all, that's fine. But we had 160,000 international protection applicants came here since 2022. That's just 3 years, right? Which is about twice the size of Galway City. One of the 26 counties' biggest cities, right? And that's just like asylum spoofers. There's multiples of that. More came on work visas and student visas, right? All the Indians and the rest of it. We've probably had 500,000 people come in like 3 years or something. Don't quote me on that. That's not a diehard figure, but we're talking like multiple times the population of Cork, Cork metro area in a couple of years. That's not just our new people. Some new people arrived. We should maybe be nice and let's not split hairs over our identity. And that's not the buzz, Catherine Connolly. Okay, sorry, it isn't, right? And it was Fine Gael and it was banks and it was NATO and it was the US-led regime and all the rest of it that's doing that in Ireland. It's doing it to Canada. It's doing it to Australia and Sweden and Italy and Germany and all the rest of us, right? And nobody in our countries wants it, as in like a small minority are for it. Most of them are paid. It's a massively unpopular, divisive issue, obviously. It's literally destroying what semblance we have of healthcare systems, of housing markets. It's killing people in debt. Ultimately, let's talk about the man in the top hat, right? The banks, right? A house made with bricks and mortar, pipes, wiring, roof, foundation, whatever, right? Like that is worth a certain amount. Like value is only put onto a thing somewhat arbitrarily. It's an economic function, right? Like it's worth a certain amount day one with the bricks and mortar, and then the rest is added value. Now you take a house that's, let's say, 40 years old. It was worth a certain amount in bricks and mortar. A person bought it or commissioned it to be built, and then they lived in it for 40 years. They pretty much rode the use out of it over that time, right? If it was like a car, it would depreciate and be effectively worth nothing, but it is worth something. And the scarcity of land isn't really relevant because there's kind of a plenty land, as they like to say. So that's not really the core issue. The increase in the price of blocks and cement and everything else is a small issue. The increase in value is the scarcity, obviously, right? The supply and the demand, and the finite creation of new housing. It can only go, even under any policy, it can only go up so fast. There's all sorts of constraints. So there's only so many builders to do it, right? There actually is a lot of housing being built in Ireland. It's just the demand. So that's how you get from a house in Dublin that in a realistic situation might be worth 250 grand because it's 50 years old and it's a bit ran through. Maybe it's worth 200 grand. Maybe you put another 100 grand into it, extend its life a bit and get comfortable and enjoy your life. But they're going for, like, let's say 600 grand, to use Dublin as the example. That entire 300 grand surplus is a completely fake, right? There is no material sort of like land scarcity / material scarcity sort of reason for that extra, we'll say 300 plus thousand to be on top of it. And yet it is, because of the mismatch between supply and demand. Now, that has been created not because someone went around destroying existing houses in the country, not because we didn't build any houses. That's part of it. But the real reason is because what you have, like 500,000 odd people come into the country in 3 years, preceded by a decade previously of still a lot of people coming into the country. That scarcity did that, and that policy was foisted upon us effectively by the banks, right? The powerful, the elite. That it didn't just happen magically. They did that in order to get those prices up, among other reasons. Because from a bank's, I mean, I know I'm going off here, right? If a bank, like if a house that otherwise costs 250 grand or less, I go into the bank, I get a mortgage, I end up paying on the 200 grand I take out, I end up paying back something like 60 grand or something interest. I don't know. Let's just say, right? Well, if the house is worth 3 times as much, I'll end up paying back 250 grand in interest or something. And that is basically fake money that they just printed off. It's creditors' money from some rich cunt in Frankfurt or some boomer in Cork or whatever. It's just magic money inflation for the rich, right? For creditors. And they basically, through a basically magic fairy dust, made the most expensive asset, the most debt exploitative thing possible, housing, the big ticket item for creditors, right? They basically enslaved people for like 3 times the value of the house over the course of, a couple of decades or less, just by pumping all these people into the country and somewhat constraining the supply. But the main issue is pumping all the people in. And that's just a left-wing issue. It is. The same goes for labor. The dampening, suppressing effect on wage growth. There's no question about it, right? Like, mass immigration is not just some nice thing. Like, some different people. Oh, cool. Oh, like, let's all be nice. Let's tolerate each other. That is completely like an abstruse, just off the wall way of looking at it. It's not that. Catherine Connolly is an intelligent woman, right? So are most of them. They're not dumb, right? If they spend 5 seconds thinking about it, they know that's true. I believe they're all just full of shit. And again, that's why they can't survive contact. That's why they won't talk to anybody about this. Because they know they can't survive these basic points. I mean, and the other thing is, if you brought in 500,000 people here in the last 5 years or whatever, they say, well, what if we just magically built a fuck ton of housing and got the prices down that way? If you did that, there would have been a surplus 500 come in, right? Because the pull factor is up, obviously. You would have to contain it. The question is, how do you contain it? I have an answer to that. I know where I would draw my lines and what's going on. What's your take on that? Their take is just, let's all be nice. They might as well be Simon Harris. They might as well be whoever. They are bankrupt, and they will be shown to be bankrupt as time goes on, of course, because Like Niamh with the septum piercing, who votes for them, who's 28 years old. Her life has radically changed, her prospects over the last 10 years. She was in her leaving cert, she thought she'd be grand no matter what happened, which she at the time she would have been if things were like that. And then the country just became like a Mad Max fest, right, where very few people can survive, young people. Fast forward another 10 years, 20 years, they start to get old, they start to get weary. They don't have children and all that. It's brutal. Like, I mean, and the left becoming ascendant, getting into power, getting into all these positions, and things are just awful. You know, it's they will go bankrupt as well reputationally. And the right are basically sort of the final boss. The right, nominal right, populist nationalists, who genuinely do have the solutions. Let's just be real. We are the only ones with. I was going to say we're the only ones with solutions, but it's not quite true. We actually haven't developed them sufficiently yet. But with a bit of work, we're the only ones with the solutions. The job then is to not go bankrupt ourselves. And that's one of the big things. I can't control Catherine Connolly. I can't control anyone, but I definitely have no influence with them. I can't make Sinn Féin not be full of shit. I've literally for years I've tried to engage with Sinn Féin proxies and, you know, tried to literally just tell them, like, you have the inertia and the clout to be the party of, why don't you just go a bit more George Galloway? Why don't you engage with us a little bit? And let's try to have a sort of a relationship here a little bit. Like, if you keep us happy, respect us a little bit, low key, then we'll kind of low key respect you a little bit, and we'll, like, you know, that type of thing. Like, we all know who the real enemy is here, you know, let's just do that. But they're incapable of any of that, because they are effectively they're all bought out. This whole NGO world is so institutional. Everywhere you go, someone is fucking paid by an NGO. Honestly, it's hard to escape it. You go onto the left among their tastemakers and their activists, and you genuinely cannot get away from how NGO funded they are. I had one recently, quite recently, I went to a thing. I kind of just debated whether to talk about it in detail, but I won't. I was at a left-wingy kind of thing, and I tried to engage and I tried to reach out to them a little bit, and I got sort of stonewalled. And I realized that it's not so much just that they're ideological Antifa or something like that. Like that they think I'm a fascist and they think I want to put people in train cars and send them off into whatever, all the kind of crazy stuff. It's not even that, because that's what people think. But then I realized that they're all that's an element. But what's really going on is that they're all institutionally affiliated. I do a quick bit of research after the fact, and I realize, okay, one, even though she denies it to my face, she actually works for an NGO which is funded by Open Societies Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation, and the EU, and various other things. And this person is purporting to be against like US imperialism and EU militarization, all this stuff. It's like, well, look, like, at the end of the day, you might be at heart, maybe to some extent, but you're also completely castrated and bought out, as in the same institutions that fund and support Fine Gael and all that, prop it up as a vassal. You're just a vassal as well. You're obviously a vassal if you're paid by the imperium itself. So, you know, if I go to these people and I say, listen, let's just be real, let's team up, basically, right? And they won't do it. It's not out of an ideological distaste that they go, oh, you're just too much of a bad person or whatever. That's actually, I'm realizing, a mistake. It is genuinely that you can't swing a cat among this nominal left without hitting someone who's on the pay. And when you trace the pay, it goes somewhere that isn't idealist. It's not an idealist money funding. It's not like the money is coming from the same regime that they themselves are kind of criticizing, and they're being paid to effectively be like a false, weak, cloistered sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Cliquey. They're paid to set up a sort of a clique and gatekeep and all that kind of stuff. And they won't actually be populists. They won't look at the landscape as it is, the population, and say, okay, where are people at? Never mind us. We're a bunch of insular activist people or whatever who all schmooze with each other. Like, say you're going to a town and you're having a meeting about, say, and again, I hate to use this because I am pro-Palestine and I don't like all this right-wing anti-Palestine stuff. It's bullshit. But take Palestine or whatever. Take whatever your niche issue is. Take some other issue. Let's just take equality or I don't know, whatever. And they're having a meeting about it, and there's 15 people there, and they, nobody shows up, nobody's interested, and they're all sort of getting paid, and they're all part of. One is there from a student union, one is there because they're on an NGO grant, the other one is connected to is Paul Murphy's buddy, or all this kind of stuff, right? So it's basically just like a I hate to use terms like this, but it's a circle jerk, right? Sorry. Like an incestuous kind of thing going on there where they're all just talking to each other. And if you were to say, well, where's the guy with the Snickers pants on who finished up work there on the site 2 hours ago? Where's the nurse? Where's the person who has no connection to the student union, no connection to the NGO, no connection to any of that? Like actual real people who are just not affiliated with your little clique. Like, where are they at? If you're in a town of, let's say, 2,000 people, or let's say you're in a town of 15,000 people, and you have a meeting where there's 10 people there or whatever, and you're wondering why you can't get any further, why you can't connect with actual people on the issue that you supposedly cherish. And I am able to say to that person, look, if an asylum center is put into this town, you will have a meeting of about 3,000 people overnight, right? And they'll have Snickers pants on, and they'll be after dropping their kids off or to whatever. And like, they'll be the real people, right? Genuine real people, broad cross section of this country, who with no NGO connection, no money, will arrive at that thing. And that's where their political interest lies. They will come out. In fact, they risk their job. They risk their reputation. It's a stressful event. RT are harassing it. They're in danger of being caught up in a dragnet, and they'll still go down. And you're lacking real popular grassroots energy, real, not NGO activists who meet each other. What you're lacking is a real connection sparked to the country, right? And what I'm saying, Snickers pants, they're like work pants. Someone's asking, work pants. No, there's a brand of them, like work pants, basically, yeah, with like padding and shit like that. Anyway, but you're lacking that. You're lacking a cohesive thing. So if you're opposing, let's say, debanks, and you're opposing NATO, and you're opposing EU militarization and expansion and excesses and all this kind of stuff, and the rest of it, like, you obviously need the people to oppose debanks and Fine Gael and all that. Well, you saw the people outside City West. Yeah, some of them were throwing bottles, and some of them were throwing bottles and they were burning out a Garda van. But that was a couple of young fellas, right? Don't forget there were thousands of people there they were shouting and jeering, and maybe they didn't mind what the young fellas were doing, but ultimately they were just normal people a nurse who was off her shift, did this or that, the other, on the dole, not on the dole. There were probably GPs there, all sorts of people, right? Who just live in the area, who come down. The real people. they are disenfranchised. They don't show up to vote. When they do show up to vote, they might even vote Connolly because they don't want to vote the other one, but they don't have options. They're not engaged with, they don't go to the NGO meetings and all the bullshit. If you want to engage with those people, the best way, ideally, would be a new form of politics where we just stop all the bullshit, stop all the partisanship and the nonsense, and stop all the gatekeeping. You can and you can't talk about this and that and the other. We can have a meeting, but it has to be based on love. All this bullshit. I've seen it so many times over the years with the asylum stuff. Of course, all voices are welcome here, but ones that are rooted in love and respect and equality and anti-hate and this and that. And you go, all right, okay. And stopping climate change and this, that, and the other. You go, okay, so everyone's welcome, but with the big, huge add-on at the end, right? Which basically like turns everyone off because they straight away hear clique. And then we find out you're funded by the regime itself. So actually, we know where your rhetoric is really coming from and why you're drawing those walls, right? Because if you took those walls down as the left-wing activist and said, fuck it, I don't care if someone's far right or far left, let's just talk, let's talk about the issues, let's include everyone, genuinely be inclusive. Let's find common ground. Instead of, obviously we disagree in all these ways. Is there something we agree on? And then we can all sort of unite in some way and not hate each other and all the rest of it. These so-called lefties know that if they did that, they would be absolutely beheaded, right, by their own institutional wing, proverbially beheaded, right? And the money would dry up, the media support would dry up, all that would dry up, and they would be out in the cold. And that's a function of power, ultimately. That's a function of power, imperial control, and debanks and all the rest of it. And they won't acknowledge that, and you can't even communicate that idea to them because they will freeze up instantly because effectively they're paid. They are just as institutional as Simon Harris, basically a holographic non-person, not really. Because any real person would say, yeah, I'll talk to anyone. Let's talk about all these issues. It would be fascinating. It would be illuminating. There's clearly 13% spoiled vote, and half the country basically, if they had candidates and if would be going that way. So clearly we should all talk, right? But no. So we don't get that. So the nominal left will just go bankrupt. And our job, my job, or my wish is to also not go bankrupt. And like I was trying to get at a while ago, I have no influence with Catherine Connolly and Sinn Féin, nor with Simon Harris, nor with this or that. But on the right, I want there to be integrity. And that's where the rubber meets the road a little bit, because in the wake of Spoil the Vote and this kind of ascendancy, what you will see is vultures coming in to take control, just like they have on the left, just like they do everywhere. It's just the nature of being alive, right? The kind of tragedy of the lost cause. You can never have a thing that is genuine and real. You know what I mean? It's just almost a function of politics of the world. Especially in this scatty democratic system we have that's so open to influence and money and coercion and all the rest of it, that the right could just get swept up and I'm not going to name names for now, but there's just so much, it's such a undervalued property that certain people can come in and just sweep up the sort of political capital. And by people, I mean people, entities with certain backing and all the rest of it, to steer it a certain way, and to do what they will with it. And in the process, delegitimize it among the people. And then you just have a delegitimized centre, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, whatever you call that. A delegitimized left, and then from the point of view of a sincere left-leaning person, they could credibly say that the right is delegitimized too, because it's a puppet of America, it's a puppet of Israel, it's a puppet of militarization and NATO, it's a puppet of capital, and all the rest of that. And it's cringe, and it's just bullshit as well. And I just wish that didn't happen. I'd like to think it wouldn't. And I will be, I will always be giving my voice to try and stop that from running away with itself, too much. And it's very obvious. It's sort of underway in Ireland with the right. It happens all the time with right-wing parties and factions and movements in other countries too. But that's what politics is. It's a big bunch of factions who gain political capital with legitimate issues based on effectively some form of popular support or sentiment. And then that becomes a tradable asset effectively for money or for influence. So basically a big entity, a nation or a financial thing or whatever, some big powerful sort of behind the scenes interest can effectively buy these. It's like when you grow a sapling in, I don't know what you call that. I'm not into plants so much, but if you want to plant an apple tree in your backyard and have it grow into a big tree, you can go to a garden center and buy one that's like that big, right? It's been grown, like you don't have to go from the seed. It's ready to rock. It's not going to die. It's past that stage. You just have to go home and plant it and walk away. That's what legit political capital built up in any situation of any stripe is effectively. It's a sapling that's a perfect thing that just needs to be watered and sort of bought and can grow, and can then be weaponized. That's liberal democracy in effect, really, in the modern era. But and the right has just a big, massive, juicy, undervalued sapling. So it's inevitable what happens then. But I mean, what I would be going for is just, let's say the right could maintain its integrity, like magically, like maintain its integrity, keep the bullshit out, or at least keep it at bay. Just continue being fairly real. If that were the case, I would be saying going forward, it's about eating the left's lunch and taking their people away. You're never going to take the paid NGO person, but they can't go out and pay a living wage to every Catherine Connolly voter, right? They can't all be on the NGO. It's only a certain few of them. The rest of them are just homeless or living at their mam's gaff. But they're just Pied Pipered by the NGO people. But if you could shave off over time their people by dropping the right-wing populist caricature and just being a bit more outreachy, by adopting issues, like I was kind of jokingly coining it dessert. I was kind of writing about it there a few weeks ago. What was it? Like the big issues of our day beyond just a naked migrant ran down the street, or transgender crazy or whatever. Like the big issues were, what was it? Demographics, economy, society, sovereignty, energy, representation, and technology. And those all intermingle with each other. But those are huge questions about society and how we want to live and all that. If we approach those issues and approach a critique of the system properly, capitalism, economics, how houses are owned and how they're built and all this kind of stuff, and I'm all for how houses are owned, by the way, like property rights at a basic level, but capitalism effectively, like how everybody gets their money and how it's distributed, the basics of economics, like going back to the drawing board and like having a theory on an economic theory, Friedrich List, or you name it, any of that stuff, and basically being against some of the, like most of the things the left so-called don't like, which is just exploitation and all that. Change the rhetoric a little bit to meet them. try to explain the immigration critique to them. That's a big thing. Because, yeah, it's all grand to be like, get them the fuck out or whatever, right? But, you know, you're dealing with millennials, college educated, like art degree bullshit or whatever, but they have a certain flavor. You have to try to appeal to them. They've been indoctrinated and love everybody and all that. So, like, try to, with a good open heart, try to say, listen, I want to talk to you. You know what I mean? I want to talk to you. You can tell me what your problem is with it. Can I explain to you where I'm coming from? Because I don't think I'm a bad guy. Do you want to hear? Do you want to talk? Right? That is a conversation that the so-called left are terrified of. And in a way, the controllers of the right wouldn't be too fond of it either. That sort of a Sistine Chapel moment, a little bit, where you actually try to appeal to the people of your nation, especially the younger ones, and you try to grab hold of them. You can be sure, I've had it on multiple times with leftists or so-called leftists, where I actually am in a situation with people like that. I intermingle with them and I end up talking to them, and I'm talking to like 2 or 3 of them, and I'll basically just say, look, I'm not going to make, you know, any bones about it. I'm not going to try and present myself as a centrist or center right, moderate conservative or whatever. I'm just going to tell you, I support mass deportations. I think, you know, all the usual far righty stuff or whatever, right? So I'm going to take ownership of it straight away. But I don't think I'm a bad guy, and I think we should have a conversation, and I think we should settle our differences and see where we disagree, agree, and, you know, have an open discourse. If you're reasonably affable, I'm not like, you know, James Bond here, but like if you're reasonably affable, a normal person, they will be sort of, and you're willing to be open as well. I'm not a right-wing caricature either, and I see your points of view and all that, the usual, you know, razzmatazz. If you do that, most ordinary people who aren't like an NGO person on the pay, they will be like, okay, yeah, I suppose you're probably not that bad a guy or whatever, and you talk and whatever. You'll always have some wrangler come around. You'll have some wrangler who's like the little, and you see it everywhere. You see it with gumbeans in towns as well with the asylum stuff. It's always the fucking same. It's such a human nature thing, power and control. You'll always have one that goes around throwing you dirty looks and trying to like get them to get away from you and all this kind of stuff, you know, and they're kind of standing there going, what, I don't know, like, well, you know, and then you're going, I'm not lying to them, I'm not tricking them or anything, like, you know, so why are you trying to tell everybody what to do? You like get the wranglers around, but they're very afraid of that phenomenon where we as a nationalist movement, instead of leaning into the partisanship, we try to avoid it where possible and try to say, listen, let's talk about, obviously we're talking about immigration, we're not hiding that, but let's talk about housing. And in fact, let's relate immigration to these questions: housing, healthcare, this, that, and the other. And by the way, I'm not just coming out here trying to point at every crazy foreigner or whatever. I know that seems a bit over the top, but like, you know, I can speak to you at your level about all these issues and like meet you halfway as well. They're terrified of that. That is a very powerful thing that it should be leaned into. Like I say, because a ton of Connolly voters, if the context were right, would go the other way. If that person was there, we didn't have it on the ballot because it was rigged. So, you know, we don't know. But of course, a ton of, they're not, it's not like everyone who voted for Connolly, all 800,000-900,000 people of them, have a septum piercing and are like fucking drugged out of their heads and paid by an NGO and like, you know, Fintan McCuntface or whatever working for the student union. They're not like, that's a tiny amount of that whole thing. They have a lot of power and control, but most of the voters themselves are just can't afford a car, can't afford a gaff. You know, they probably do find it a bit weird when they go down O'Connell Street and it's that far in, and you know, like they can be spoken to, they can be reached. It's just that there's a firewall up. And we just need to basically fucking headbutt the shit out of it until it starts crumbling a little bit. And it will as time goes on. So that's all I'm trying to tell you. I could just, you know, I should start streaming more or whatever, because and structuring a bit better. But I'm just trying to see if there's any key points, because I'll just wrap it up now, right? So they're bankrupt. I'll read you my actual notes verbatim. We need to play to the left, not just each other. And I know I'm doing that now. I think I need to get on TikTok and start doing this in practice so that I'm not a hypocrite. Because right now I'm only speaking to you. What fuckery will be created to fill the nationalist vacuum? Yeah. And the other thing is, how long will the state even last? I genuinely do wonder about this at the moment. How long the state will actually even last? I don't know if it's got legs. And I think it was only yesterday or the day before, it was the first time. I don't know why. It was Tom Clonan or whatever his name is, was giving the kind of Michael McDowell speech about the cherished state, don't spoil your vote and all this stuff. And I realized there was a degree of defensiveness in his voice, and I heard it from a few too many of them in the last week, especially after City West. And just kind of, I know, just got like a telepathic sense of it or something, which means nothing, of course, that for the first time ever, just the notion in my mind, for some reason, entered my head of that, oh, whoa, I don't know, actually, to be honest. I don't know if this state has got the legs to limp on that far. I could see the crisis of the likes of City West and other things, and the general decline of standards of living, sectarianism with diversity and all that stuff, and just the intolerability of everything, the unfairness of everything. It's collapsing, and I just got this sense of like, yeah, I don't know, like as Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael and boomerism and all that dies off, like, does this state have the legs to kind of survive? Obviously, the country will survive. Obviously, human beings on this land will survive. And Ireland in some fashion. The whole idea of different republics in France or whatever. It just dawned on me that, like, I don't know if the current state, the current status quo, the current order, I'm not talking about like one party gets in it instead of another. I mean the real state, this current brand, like, this current structure, I just don't know, can it last? I think it's completely out of fucking gas, out of fumes, gas, out of petrol, diesel. So I don't know where we're going, but to me anyway, my view, I'm clear on it for myself, that I don't think a political solution is necessarily going to matter, in the sense that I don't think we're going to elect some party and like go through the system of constitutional change or whatever it is and change everything. I don't think that's possible, basically, right? Can you imagine how many, like, if you yourself now were elected Taoiseach in the morning, and you had a super majority in the Dáil and all this kind of stuff, and we started enacting all these policies, and it was perfect. It was anti-imperialism, anti-capitalism, like certain form of capitalism. It was finance capitalism. I mean, it was nationalist. It was all that. Sure, you'd be getting a bullet in the head, right? You'd be getting drone striked. So, and before you'd even get to that, you would just be tripped up at every opportunity and the rest of it. And that would take 60 years to overcome all these hurdles. What's really going to happen before that is everything just kind of coming apart a little bit. But that doesn't mean the political isn't still valuable. It's still good to get a 13% spoil vote. It's still good for the National Party to get elected here, there, and the rest of it. It's part of the story. It's a destiny that has to happen, but because it's part of pushing the whole thing forward. But it's like, that's not the end game to me anyway. Is piddling through like vote shares and all that too much, because it's all a bit rigged anyway. It's all a bit limited and stunted, and it's designed to be like that. This liberal democracy stuff is designed to be like that. You see France and Germany locking out AFD and these others. It's designed to be like that. It is not designed to allow transfer of power in real terms. It's designed for the opposite. And that's not to mention the NGOs and the online algorithms and all the other fuckery that goes on. But so what I focus more on is the Irish people as they exist. We need to be on side with them. As time goes on and events unfold, they drift more towards our point of view anyway. Whether they currently vote for Connolly or this or that or Mickey Mouse, they will inevitably be pushed over towards where we are if we maintain our integrity. So that's a given. But we also need to help them. And so for me, I know who I'm appealing to. I am appealing to, or I want to, at least in the future, appeal to the Connolly crew, the under 40s, under 35, under 30, whether they're left, right, up or down, wherever they're at, I want us to try to appeal to them and try and win them over, so that even if it's 4 million Indians and 1 million Irish, I want a good purchase on all those Irish. Or if there's World War III, or no matter what it is, like, that's the constituency that I'm interested in. I'm not interested in make Europe great again. I'm not interested in anti-pro-Palestine. I'm not interested in like the Zionism, basically. I'm not interested in America or any of this other stuff. I'm interested in basic nationalism, basic justice, and I want to appeal to that's who I feel like we should be trying to appeal to, you know, and not GB News and the rest of it. And I feel like if we were, of course, I think I'm right, obviously, but if we were to do that, maintain integrity and appeal to the people of Ireland, basically, and especially the ones who matter more, the younger ones, because the older ones at the end of the day will just be like senile or dead before long. And it's not to be insulting, but that's it, right? That era has passed. They're old. The real political is the younger people, like younger, middle age, sort of somewhere in between, and those even yet to enter adulthood. Like as they do enter adulthood, they're the story of tomorrow, right? So we have to play in that world, and we have to fight for that. And by fighting for that, you have to, you know what I mean? It's like I've been saying. I think it'd be better to just lean pro-Palestine. One, because it's just and right, I think, but two, because it just obviously makes sense. Because it's just right, true, and it's expedient. I mean, there's no argument against. And various other issues, appeal to them. And if you do that, it's kind of like, I feel like victory is inevitable then, or like actually having the lion's share of the electorate, of the cultural purchase and all that kind of stuff. And basically a war, a peaceful legal war against what is the word I'm looking for? If somebody can help me. When people are purchased, I can't think of the word, but basically people who are bought off, NGOs, PPNs, all sorts of bullshit like that, gatekeepers. That's what I would say ultimately is a war against the gatekeepers, right? And gatekeepers is pretty much synonymous with people who are paid off. A war against the gatekeepers. Are you left? Are you right? Are you Connolly? Are you Steen? Are you this? Are you that? And by the way, even Pater Tobin, for example, right? To give you a good example, he had a conversation with someone from Main 2 or whatever a few weeks ago. It's like there's almost like a post. We have to get over a former view of decorum as well. Like Pater Tobin was talking about how if Maria Steen is kept out and the government are so cloistered and fragile that they can't allow some debate, that he called it, well, you'll have these people, and he was clearly referring obliquely to get them out and that kind of stuff, like the more sort of rootin' tootin' far right, we'll say. He sort of says all these people, these ne'er-do-wells will start to have more of a hold on people. That's who people will go to listen to. And you kind of go, what? People who just say like Ireland for the Irish and all that. And he's formally talked about how anybody who thinks ethnicity has anything to do with nationality, which is a core belief of pretty much the majority of the population of the entire planet. But anyway, he decides that that is somehow a big line in the sand, and that he said, like, he was basically very aggressive. We're going to, like, basically like expunge you from society type of rhetoric. So he's obviously got this gatekeeping thing going on, and he's kind of serious about it. And I don't know where that comes from exactly. But whether it's him or whether it's some bullshit NGO person who won't let a left wing and a right wing person have a conversation, I think we need to push for a war on that. You know what I mean? That kind of stuff in general. We live in very rough times, so it's incumbent on all of us to actually. It's like the same rhetoric you'll get from Connolly or anyone else. I'm basically just saying that, but for real. Let's be inclusive. Let's talk to each other. Let's not draw a line around certain people who can't be talked to for some reason, right? Obviously, if you're a criminal, if you're going around beating people up or something like that, it's different. But if you're a person who just has ideas, and some people like them, some people don't, but like, it's an idea, we need to talk. We need to have conversations, debates, and all that. And if you're not willing to do that, then you're full of shit and you need to be marginalized, basically. I think that's a very fair heuristic to push for. And I feel like that would solve everything. It genuinely would. Like the point at which the left is corrupt and the right is corrupt, but both have legitimate points to bring to the table. Conversation would be the garlic to the vampire of the bad on both sides. Because of course, if the unbought off, decent left talk to the right wing version of that, well, then the corruption gets purged on both sides. Like, I could say to the left wing person, listen, on your side of things, like, you're just your people are paid by all these NGOs and this, that, and the other, and here's my critique. And they'd say, yeah, there's some truth to that, fair enough. And they would say, well, on your hand, you have all this like Atlanticist money and all this, that, and the other, and so much would be exposed in that process. Conversation, open discourse from every side of things would be such a purifying force, and that's why it doesn't happen. I'm all for that. That's what I want. Yeah, no more notes. I don't know. Was there anything else? I mean, let's check what all you folks have to say. It's just like there is. I do tire of the right as well sometimes. This whole. I've gone over it before, but this whole thing of like just foreigners. Like, obviously, it's a key point, and it's driven by the lack of discourse. Like, if right-wing people in their own echo chamber had to engage with everybody and could engage with everybody, there'd be a softening, like not a compromising, but a softening of sort of a relaxing a little bit, where you talk about other things as well. It folds into the conversation in a more organic way, as opposed to just being this like hyped up faction, which everybody is now. It's the same way, let's say, with Zionism on the right. If I'm talking to a lefty and I say to them, well, if you're not allowing right-wing people to talk to you, and you're pro-Palestine, right? You're ardently pro-Palestine, but you describe every right-wing person as basically a non-citizen, like a blacklisted, terrible person. If a person wants immigration stopped and people deported or whatever. So you're saying that, like, there's situations where I'll have left-wingers say, more or less say, I can't be pro-Palestine, that kind of way. And I go, well, like, why can't I? Like, why can't I go to the pro-Palestine march? In fact, why don't you have someone like me or someone else come up and say, hey, this isn't a partisan thing, by the way. We have everybody here, even people we really don't like on other issues, but this just shows how powerful it is. Why don't you do that? That would be good for your movement, for your issue, for Palestine. But they're more concerned about their political control than they are about the issue at hand. And I say to them, like, well, what you have on the right is a bunch of vultures who are trying to indoctrinate right-wing people into being big Zionists, Tommy Robinson and all that. And I say, I'm against the Tommy Robinson-ification, but like you're just as guilty for driving it because you won't open up. You won't let those people be people. You know what I mean? You're like dehumanizing those people for tangential views, immigration and the rest of it. And you won't have them. You're not courting them at all on Palestine or whatever. You're feeding them to the Zionists. And then the Zionists have a legitimate, organic political base. And then you'll turn around and complain about it. You know, it's like both sides are kind of guilty, you know, of that. And it feeds into it. Like the left-wing firewall feeds into the right-wing sort of buyout. And then they'll complain that their agenda is being stymied by a bunch of Atlanticist, Zionist, brain-rotted right-wingers or whatever. You know, it's like, well, yeah, because you won't talk to them. Like you won't compete for those hearts and minds. I want to compete for left-wing hearts and minds and right-wing, because why not? What's your problem? Why don't you? Why don't you meet people halfway? Why don't you have difficult conversations? Because you're bought out. You're absolutely bought out. So, I don't know. I see some. I'm just going to read some chats here. Yeah, I don't know. I know I've just been kind of rambling, but I'm just kind of giving you like a ramble. Like I could try to structure all my points. I might start doing TikToks because they're short and limited on just a bunch of individual points. But here's me scrolling my phone, like, yeah, like, you know, the takeaways from today are the same things I've been talking about for a long time. Like, you know, the co-option of the right in waiting, the need to not try to be like a Trump color revolution or like a CIA color revolution, but just to appeal to most ordinary Irish people, particularly the young, and to take every opportunity to meet them in the middle or appeal to their things that are close to their hearts and stuff like that where possible, as opposed to doing the opposite, and then turn our guns on our proverbial, right? Okay, that's a figure of speech, on the regime itself. You know what I mean? The actual powerful, like the money power, the NATO power. Like we are just a vassal state. We do live under this empire. So let's like find the common ground on that as such. But so that's just kind of where I want to. That's been my, like, if any of you who are familiar with my live streams or tweets and all that should know, if you're familiar enough, you should know that I've been bleeding on this point for months and months and months, and nothing changes with this election for me, in a sense. The hastening of the demise of Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, and the solidity of the spoil the vote is good, but it doesn't surprise me, and it's only going to go more that way. And we knew that 6 months ago. We knew that years ago. It's just a question of what, if you're a nationalist or you're a justice-oriented individual, whatever you call it, then what next? Is it just like, you know, some carnival barking like multi-millionaire or whatever comes in and starts a party and we all do that, or like, you know, and all the points are toxic and not conducive to an actually useful political future for Ireland and a broad-based thing? Are we just going to do that, or you know? That's the question. We like the election tells us things that we already knew are in fact happening. It confirms that. The question is, where do you go with it? And the other thing too is just, again, this is all the same point. I mean, this one video is making one big point, really. But like, if someone says, no, we just need to steamroll the left woke tards and all this, and it's like, look, at the end of the day, I think they were indoctrinated on a lot of stuff. We all were, right? To be like, oh, we just need to be loving and nice and let everybody in and all this. But a certain amount of them are that way, but like, you know, the young, like under 65, or sorry, under 35, I think it was, 80% of women, I think it was, voted for Connolly, something like that. And like, what are you going to do with that? Are you going to say, oh, bunch of empty egg carton woke retards, or are you going to say, yeah, they're voting for what they think is good? Um, they, you know, they have probably good reasons in their minds for voting for her. Like, let's appeal to that sentiment. Let's appeal to that whatever sense of justice they have, grievances they have, without sacrificing the key issues. Obviously, we're nationalists and all that, but like, you know, you can be as based as you want to be, or something, as like Trumpy or something as you want to be, as fuck all immigrants, or, you know, that kind of stuff. Like, you can be way more based than me by saying whatever you want to say, being as right wing caricature as you want to be, but I mean, you're going nowhere, like, because that's they're the younger people are looking for answers, and they're looking for it with Connolly. They're not going to get it, but they're also going to be allergic to a Zionist, not anti-capitalist, not anti-imperialist, as in anti-American imperialism and influence in Ireland, by which I mean, you know, Atlanticism, basically. Like, if they see all that, they just think cringe, they'll think dodgy, they'll think weird. And if you're overly crude with the immigration stuff, maybe, in how you present it, they will just not, they'll just be cold on you. So, like, go be based by yourself, you know what I mean? But whereas I'd be like, no, why not take the message, take the ideas, refine them, but get specific about what they are. Be careful about which billionaires you allow to run your movement or whatever, and and try and appeal to those people, because if they're not going to be on your side, then who is, right? You know, it to me, it just seems like a basic intuitive thing, no? Um, that we need to take a monopoly over the young people. We obviously don't have it now, mostly because of gatekeeping. But that can be beaten. The gatekeeping can be beaten, if you have a solid vehicle. You know what I mean? But you have to have a righteous cause. You have to really be in the right to be able to break those barriers down and basically force your way in. You know, and I think it can be done for sure, though. As time goes on, put pressure on all these issues. I would be well up for people doing that, putting pressure on the left, basically respectfully, politely, legally, all that stuff, right? Not accepting their little clique, their little hegemony of their God-given right to have purchase over, like, younger people and discourse and ideas and issues, whether it be Palestine or neutrality or this or that or the other. No. We're all Irish here, you know, that kind of way. We all have ideas. We're all welcome. Get the fuck out of the way. That type of thing. And then just engage with people. Don't force the issues too hard. Don't force the immigration question, but just demand the right to the seat at the table, I think, because at the moment it's just a bunch of NGOs and student unions talking to each other. And I think people are sick of that. So I don't know, you know, take from all that what you will. Yeah. But there's some good stuff going on, you know, as well. There's some good stuff going on. I think it all does bode well. I think it all does bode well once the right doesn't, on the back of this, become a bunch of dusty, carnival barking, snobby CIA agents, by extension. I mean, if we can avoid that, then we'll be grand. So anyway, there's a couple of super chats there, and I'll get gone. So Lockery gives 5, thank you very much, and says the status quo as expected, unfortunately, remains. Career Orange Order zealot and career neo-communist holding authentic Irish nationalism back. Yeah, and like at the end of the day, the Connolly thing, I think Connolly's fine, right? Overall, you could do a lot worse. She's good on some of the issues historically. She's got gravitas. Whatever, right? But that whole crowd that she's in with, like you see this like pan left meeting with Paul Murphy, Mary Lou, Holly Cairns, all these like people, right? That thing over time, over the years, will start to look so Fine Gaely, let's just say, right? And that is totally to the advantage of, from my perspective, my advantage. I would much rather just have conversations with them and let the marketplace of ideas settle it or whatever, and have candidates be able to run in elections. Like, why are like this the disingenuousness of them to be happy to run an election where it was effectively rigged and it didn't have a broad range of candidates representing most the main interests or whatever. They should be ashamed of that. Like, they should say, I don't want to, like, it's like getting into a boxing match against someone who has 2 broken arms and, like, you know, missing a leg or whatever. You know, you should kind of say, look, I don't want to knock this person out. You know what I mean? I want it to be fair here. I want to have a proper victory. There's no magnanimity in this kind of, and there's a real shadow over them, like with all that too, you know. The win, you can feel there's a lack of confidence. They're giving out about the spoiled votes even after the fact. It's like rent free, you know what I mean, in the head. Because they know they are limping a little bit now, because the focus is on them. They have this coalition. They're trying to act like it's 2015 and they have this sort of uncontested cultural and political hegemony, but they know they don't. They know they're not welcome at a lot of stuff. They know they can't talk to the people. They know they can only be in cliques among each other. And they know they can win an election and have a fairly big victory once the election is rigged by limiting candidates, which was done for them by Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. And with a huge apathetic non-turnout of voters and a huge spoiled vote. It's a joke. So they can sort of pat themselves on the back, but it's a complete joke. And so their card is effectively marked now. And we're on the ascendancy if we can keep our shit together. And that's kind of it. But like, it is a career neo-communist. Yeah, it's, I don't know why your chat made me say that, but as you said, yes, the status quo as expected, unfortunately. That's the thing I was reacting to, is like, it is so the status quo. I mean, Holly Cairns and all these bullshit artists are just as cliquey as Heather Humphreys and the rest of them. They are not engaging with the people. They really, really are not. So that's how it is. Another one from Lockery. Both the military-industrial complex and mass migration industrial complex are 2 sides of the same coin. The crusties miss the room completely, though. Yeah, it's just mad to me. The military-industrial, I'm repeating what you said, the military-industrial complex, which is this US empire, this vassal EU state, capitalist empire, effectively, that whole thing. It's like, yeah, they're doing mass immigration. Not like, it's not. Catherine Connolly didn't create mass immigration, or some, like, you know, again, septum piercing girlo. She didn't create mass immigration. I didn't create it. It was created by the aforementioned. Like, it's for them. It's their power interest. Oh, but you just don't understand Chinese people and Indian people, and you're not worldly or whatever. It's like, well, go talk to an Indian or a Chinese person about immigration into India or China. They don't do it. They wouldn't have it. They're as racist as fuck, right? You know what I mean? It's just like, pull your head out of your hole, like, and just actually think for 5 seconds, you know. But, you know, apparently that's impossible. So, but thank you all the same. Oh, another one as well. Thank you. 5 again. Ulster is Ireland. Kosovo is Serbia. Cyprus is Greek. Yes. Yeah. Exactly. And where else is where? Palestine is Palestine. Israel is Palestine. One state solution with, what did George Galloway say? So not Israel is Palestine. Israel is the Holy Land. So the Holy Land, a one state solution, and a liberal democracy for all. I'm up for that. I think that would be fair. Living in harmony and equality. So just wanted to add that one to the list. Taiwan is China. What else? I can't think of any more that spring to mind that are matter. I don't want to say Ukraine is Russia. I don't know. I don't want to wade into that. Maybe half of it is. Who knows? Yet to be determined. But yeah. So I am anti-US imperialism, big time, and it's not gonna being. I'm not sure where Declan Ganley stands, right? I don't know. But let's say Atlanticist people who work with Mike Pompeo and, Russian assets in the 90s and stuff, just people like that in general. I'm not sure if they would really agree with some of that stuff, even though that has huge purchase and spiritual belonging in Ireland, that point of view, left, right, just popular sentiment. I'm not sure if those differing views can reconcile with each other. I wonder if maybe they could through discourse and dialogue. I mean, maybe that's worth looking into. So thank you. Armchair Limerick Nationalist 5, keep going, sound for the ramble. Well, thanks very much. Once again. And River Queen, cool. 2, thank you, Gerard. I appreciate it from you as well. Cheers. So that's where I leave it. That's the election. Things as they always were, or things going as they always were going to go. The big question is, I don't have to fight for Fine Gael voters, right? I mean, if presented with an all-right looking candidate in a nice, who talks fancy, right? They'll probably vote for them. They would have voted for Maria Steen on that alone, because Maria Steen is like Mary McAleese, but actually Catholic or whatever, that type of vibe. So that would do it for them. But the big ascendant chunk, which is the Connolly world, I think we should be aggressively, but in a friendly way, trying to steal their lunch, right? Trying to barge in on their false sense of purchase over the Irish hearts and mind, young Irish hearts and mind. Even the ones who are a little bit liberal and a little bit right on and all that, we need to actually say, no, we're not just a bunch of carnival barking American gladios or something like that, which is not true, but could end up true. We're not that, actually. We're genuine Irish people, and we're not haters. We don't wake up in the morning just want to hate foreigners for no reason, right? Or whatever. There's a big story to this. Can we talk? If we can do that, then we can get places and heal as a country. Because it's going to be rough. It's going to be like World War III plus energy running out for various reasons. Plus like 5 million Indians in like Munster alone. You know what I mean? We need, like, as Irish people, we need to sort out our differences as well, like, and just get our heads fucking straight. That's what I believe. So anyway, thanks to the super chatters. Thanks to everybody in the chat tonight. Anybody watching, like I say, I appreciate you spending the time with me. So, Ihua, see ya.